Ptolemy VIII, sometimes were called Physon by the Greek Egyptians, which means potbelly. So he was quite a big lad who liked his food. He was born in 184 BCE and died in 116 BCE. He was the youngest son of Ptolemy V and of Cleopatra I. He had 3 reigns in Egypt, so this just shows you how volatile Egypt is now. The countries around the Mediterranean Sea and the Aegean are so volatile at the moment. To be Pharaoh, to be on the throne of Egypt, you had to have the support of the people. Now, who am I talking about? I'm talking about the people in Alexandria. They're not Egyptians. There is a Jewish quarter. Alexandria was a very safe place for foreigners to live. It was quite secure. So there was a big migration that came into Egypt to get away from all the fighting in the Canaanite area and Syria. Remember, there's been 5 Syrian wars that's overspilt into Canaan. And before that, there was always problems. You know, the 18th, 19th, 20th dynasty, 3rd intermediate period, late period, there's always been conflict in Canaan and Syria. So a safe haven is Alexandria. It was founded by Alexander the Great, and lots of Greek migrants were encouraged to come and settle in Alexandria. Well, that was quite a while ago, over 100 years ago. So Alexandria really is a very Greek cosmopolitan city. So you needed the support of those Greek Egyptians. You also needed the support of the elites, because if the elites didn't fulfill their agenda, then they used to stir up the populace in Alexander to revolt. Let's go kill the king and attack the palace and that sort of thing. The rest of Egypt are the normal ancient Egyptians. And the impression you seem to get is that the Greek Egyptians tend not to worry about the ancient Egyptians at all. The native people, they live mainly in the Upper Nile Valley, and they are engaged in farming and those sorts of activities. And remember, the wheat yields of Egypt are twice as much as any other country because of that lovely black fertile soil that comes to Egypt every year with the flood. So that's the situation. You needed popular support. You needed to keep the elites happy to stay on the throne of Egypt as a pharaoh. The Aegean and the Mediterranean are looking towards Rome to settle disputes. So if neighbours have long-standing disputes, they go to Rome. They seek Rome as the middle person. So Rome is becoming the rising power in the Aegean and the Mediterranean. Now remember, the Egyptian priest who lived during the Greek period, Manetho, was the one who created the dynastical families, which is the Egyptian chronology. That chronology has been finished for about 60 years now and is in the libraries of Alexandria, where it survived, thankfully. So Ptolemy VIII is the younger brother, but he became the co-ruler with his brother in 169 BCE. It was just about to engage itself in a 6th Syrian war against the Seleucid Empire. Ptolemy VI wanted to go off and be a soldier. Yeah, I want to be victorious. Well, unfortunately, he was captured and returned to Egypt in 168 BCE. In 164 BCE, Ptolemy VIII expelled his younger brother, Ptolemy VI, and a year later, Ptolemy VIII was actually expelled from Egypt by the populace of Alexandria. So Ptolemy VI returned to Egypt and died in 145 BCE. So now we have the second reign of Ptolemy VIII from 145 BCE. The Greeks comment that he was brutal and cruel, but it was most probably the bureaucratic government that he was cruel to, rather than the everyday person who was going about their business. This second reign, the first reign was with his brother, the second reign is from 144 BCE to 132 BCE. He was co-ruler with his sister Cleopatra II, And as I mentioned in the other video, he took a shine to Cleopatra III, who was his niece, and he married her and made her queen. Now, what happened to Ptolemy VII? Ptolemy VII seems to disappear, so it was highly likely he was murdered. So you got the brother and sister, fight like cat and dogs, don't we? I know, I've got 3 sisters, so I know what it's like. So the civil war starts between Cleopatra II, who controlled Alexandria, and Ptolemy VIII, who controls the rest of Egypt. So from 132 BCE to 126 BCE. Ptolemy VIII is controlling sort of Upper Egypt, and he's got his niece with him, who's also his wife, Cleopatra III. And he hears that Cleopatra II is in negotiations with the Seleucid Empire. So what's he do? He gets hold of his eldest son, Memphite, and he kills him and chops up his body and sends it to his sister wife, Cleopatra II, on her birthday as a strong message not to do any negotiations with the Seleucid Empire or else. So you can see the lengths that he will go to make his point, where that brutality comes into it. So 126 BCE is the 3rd rule of Ptolemy VIII. So he's ruling, he's made it up with his sister, Cleopatra II. He's got his other wife, his niece, Cleopatra III, and the 3 of them co-rule Egypt together. What's interesting is that experience in the Upper Nile Valley. Ptolemy VIII comes into direct contact with native Egyptians. So if you think about these pharaohs, these rulers, they live in cities, they live in palaces most of the time. He would have had to have gone down to Aswan to release the god Hapi into the River Nile to create the flood. He would have had to have gone down to Waset, what they called Thebes, for the Feast of the Valley in July, and stay there for the Feast of Opet in August. He would have had to have gone to Memphis, because it was the religious capital of Egypt. So he had those duties to travel, but while he's traveling, he's living in palaces. He's not coming into contact with native Egyptians. So this time when he is in the Upper Nile Valley, he got to learn, find out about the native Egyptians. Probably realised that he was untapping a wealth of sophisticated intelligence, because look what the Egyptians had achieved. They've built temples and pyramids for thousands of years. They're obviously well organised, good managers, and he took this on board. So when he came back for this third, he started appointing native Egyptians into the Egyptian bureaucracy to run the country. This is the first time that the native Egyptians have been engaged in government since Alexander the Great came to Egypt in 332 BCE. So 116 years later, they are starting to be appointed into the government. So what is this legacy which Ptolemy VIII has left? Well, he repaired the temples in Egypt. So that experience of living in the Upper Nile Valley for around about 6 to 8 years, he realised he had a duty to repair the temples. And that goes back to the 12th dynasty, when Senusret I took responsibility of the temples to originally to control the clergy. But from that moment onwards, kings of Egypt were responsible for the repair and upkeep of temples. He was brutal. He was a shrewd politician. That's how the Alexandrian Greeks describe him. He made those tough decisions, and he is a survivor. Remember, he had 3 different reigns. He was expelled by his brother. He came back. Civil war, he had to live in Upper Egypt, he came back to the 3rd reign. So he's a survivor. That's the one big thing. He had an interest in philosophy and theology and history and exotic animals. And he did write books, which ended up in the Alexandria Library. During his reign, there was the first crossing of the Indian Ocean via the Red Sea, which was in 118 BCE. And hopefully this will start a new trade route with the exotic India. A second voyage was made across the Indian Ocean in 116 BC. So the idea was to sail out in the summer when the Indian Ocean was calm, and then stay there for the winter, do your buying, load up your trade ship and sail back to Egypt during the summer. So that was the trade. So it was quite a perilous journey. They obviously had heard stories that the Indian Ocean could be very volatile, so they were taking no chances. Expensive cargoes only are expensive once they're landed. As I mentioned before, he had one son with his sister wife Cleopatra II. With his niece, well, that was different. He had 5 children with his niece, 2 boys and 3 girls. One boy, and of course there was an additional 1 boy from a concubine. Ptolemy VIII was succeeded by his son Ptolemy IX in 116 BCE. If you've enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button, thumbs up, and I'll see you real soon. Bye for now.